As always, I am your host, Sean McKinda.
And I'm your host, Jackson Keller.
And if you're noticing some audio differences between how we normally sound, I know at least I am not in my usual recording spot using my not usual recording microphone because I am family traveling for holidays.
I actually am recording this fresh off of returning from family holiday stuff, so if I sound weird, then I fucked something up.
So like, just giving you the heads up on that one. But we are, of course, we had to record this episode because it's fucking Star Wars discourse season. It's discourse season. Discourse. And we, of course, saw the new Star Wars movie.
Of course.
A Star Wars The Force.
Oh, God. Well, you know what's great, Sean?
What's great?
We'll have officially done an episode on every fucking Disney Star Wars. So because they don't have their shit together and they don't have anything announced, we don't have to worry about this cultural behemoth for quite some time.
I was gonna say we're gonna at least get a little bit of a break, aren't we?
We sure are. I'm gonna say a solid, at least 2 years before we have to deal with Disney Star Wars again.
But what if we want to talk about The Mandalorian and Baby Yoda?
We don't.
I mean, we don't. Baby Yoda, the meme, I absolutely fucking hate. I am losing my goddamn mind every time I see it.
You know what? Having watched a bit of The Mandalorian, all right, here's a mini review of The Mandalorian for y'all because I've seen the first couple episodes. You know, just get it all out of the fucking way.
Don't ask for it.
Don't ask for it. So The Mandalorian, I like the aesthetic a whole lot more than the films. I like that they're focused on kind of the grimier side of the Star Wars universe. It's got more character, kind of like a Western, you know, all the bounty hunting and stuff. Baby Yoda is cute. I can see why he's a big meme. And he does some neat stuff. And it's basically a big budget adaptation of Yoshi's Island.
Including the sobbing and bubbles?
Yes.
Cool.
The problem is that even though I enjoy watching the show while it is in front of me because of all the aesthetic elements and just the, I think, better use of the Star Wars universe than the new films, when it comes to the actual story, I couldn't give less of a shit, which means that I'm not as inclined to sit down and watch it to the end. So there you go. That's the review of The Mandalorian. It's fun enough. If you like Star Wars, you'll dig it. There.
But we're not here to talk about The Mandalorian. We're here to talk about the new Star Wars movie, which is, Jackson, what's the title of the new Star Wars movie? And I'm throwing this to you not because I have already forgotten it, but because I want to make sure that you remember.
All right, Sean. It's a Star Wars Episode 9, Guns of the Patriots.
Oh.
Rise of Skywalker.
Right. Rise of Skywalker. But before we talk about that, it's probably worth noting our feelings on the past two. If you have somehow not listened to our recap episode that came out 2 weeks ago,
I would go as far as to say that one's required listening for this, but we'll give a short recap.
I would say as well, actually, that one is definitely worth diving into. But quick and dirty synopsis of it. Force Awakens, it's fine. It's a J.J. Abrams movie. It feels like there was potential within their pages and frames, but and then The Last Jedi I really, really liked. I think as a standalone movie, it fucking rules a whole hell of a lot.
As for me, Force Awakens, I grow more and more irritated with every day. I think it's boring. I think that it's a huge squandering of potential, and I gave it a lot more rope than it deserved because I was hoping that the series would go somewhere. Rip. And Last Jedi, the best of the Disney Star Wars movies, I would say, by a significant margin, but not because I think it's especially great. I appreciate that it is confrontational, but I think it's kind of a half measure, and in a lot of ways, kind of a retread of Empire and elements from Return of the Jedi that bring it down a little bit in my estimation. But otherwise, it tried.
I mean, that's more than could be said for a lot of these
for
Disney
literally
ones.
any of the other ones. I guess Rogue One kind of tried, but
Yeah, it was doing something, but
yeah.
I guess we've kind of also given away the ghost now on how we feel about that their Skywalker movie. It was certainly a movie.
All right, here's the way that I am putting this. There's a reason I wasn't just being me when I made a reference to Metal Gear Solid 4 with that little bit. That was a very purposeful reference. If you are a Metal Gear Solid fan, you will know that MGS4 was a game that very much served a similar purpose as Rise of Skywalker, billing itself as like a grand finale, end of the story, like definitive closure to everything.
As was like every other Metal Gear Solid game in the series.
Yeah, definitely. This one definitely more so. And in fact, that actually was one of the big criticisms of it, was that whereas MGS 2 and 3 were meant to be the end of the series, but weren't quite so in your face about it. They left some open-ended questions, had some ambiguities. MGS4 was like, all right, we're going to end everything by tying it into a neat and tidy bow, and of course the series still didn't end there, just like Star Wars is going to be. There's actually a lot of comparisons to be made between Star Wars and MGS, I think. But so this movie, like MGS4, as far as being a fan service closure finale, it's fun. I had fun with it. How much fun I'll have as time goes on, we'll see, but I enjoyed some elements of, like, the space adventure. I enjoyed some things. Palpatine, I wanted Palpatine to be memes, and he was. Ian McDiarmid's always fun. I mean, what can I say? Like, these Disney movies, they're good at being fun, if nothing else. But fun is a fleeting, temporary feeling. And when it comes
There's
to
no such thing as an eternal fun.
There's no such thing as an eternal fun. And, you know, once that sort of initial buzz of fun has sort of worn off, you're left with, like, the actual meat and potatoes of the narrative. And I think there's stuff here. For now, I don't know how this is going to hold up. I'm especially sour on Force Awakens right now. I would probably put this above Force Awakens. I think that there's slightly more to work with, but the franchise was just so mismanaged. It contradicts itself. It contradicts Last Jedi. It even contradicts parts of Force Awakens. Just goes back and forth at every turn. Just tries to stuff the movie full of so much stuff, just like MGS4. And it leaves me with the feeling that, like, there were some things in here that could have worked if you had developed them properly. But of course they did not, because they didn't have a plan for what the fuck they were doing.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm as kind to it as Jackson is.
I should clarify. I think the main reason I'm being so kind to it is that my expectations were very, very low.
That's entirely fair. But like, I had mine also pretty fucking rock bottom because, as I said, I really like The Last Jedi, and I'm like, this is going back to Abrams, and Abrams is going to throw everything I liked about that away. Because Rose was a character, and we need to have her not be a character anymore, says the fucking chucklefuck fanboys. And yeah, that's pretty much what happens. It really undoes a lot of what The Last Jedi was trying to do. There's some, like, sniffs at The Last Jedi, like the themes of it, but, like, nothing cohesive. A lot of the character building is undone fairly quickly. And, like, even beyond that, taking it as a moment-to-moment piece of art, it's competent. There's no denying that. Every, like, scene, and this is, I think, what Jackson was getting at, is that every scene feels good. It's enjoyable to watch while you're in the scene, but then it moves to the next scene that has just the most tangential relation to the previous scene. That scene feels good while you're watching it, and by the time you reach the end, it is so wildly different from where it started that you're kind of left just lost and confused as to what the fuck was going on, only remembering the brief moments of fun that you had throughout the movie. But even that, and I saw this movie like 5 days ago, is fading from my memory. I remember a little bit at the end, and I remember some snippets of other scenes, but on the whole, there's not a whole lot of memorability to come come from this movie, just because everything about it is so disposable, from scene to scene, from an overarching story, an overarching conclusion. It doesn't deliver on anything of real value, anything concrete, and so it just feels very hollow everywhere. Which, you know what? Once again, it's fun when you're watching it, but I don't know. I want more than just fun while I'm watching it.
I think the nicest thing that I can say, that I could definitively say, is that I'm glad that the movie is so conclusive in a lot of ways, because it's both a nice thing and also a frustrating thing, in that it brings us to kind of a clean slate point, in the same way that Return of the Jedi did. So it's nice in that, like, okay,
it's us,
maybe
the true Final Order.
So, like, maybe it's nice in the way that, like, maybe in the future there's opportunities to do something cool with the franchise. Like,
I still want the fucking Darth Sith, whatever the fuck, the spiky head dude from episode 1. I still want his movie as, like, a drug lord that they kind of hinted at in Solo. I want the fuck out of that.
Yeah. So there's definitely room to do that kind of shit. Although we'll save this discussion for the very end. But the frustrating thing is that it basically takes us. Every movie has been a mirror of some original trilogy movie in a lot of ways, to varying degrees, of course. But it pretty much literally does bring us to exactly where Return of the Jedi brought us. And that's super frustrating, because Return of the Jedi also, as an ending, presented us with a paradigm shift and a universe of possibilities that for Force Awakens they went right back to New Hope shit. Which, I hope they wouldn't do that again. But they might. I wouldn't put it past them.
I think it's also worth noting just how this movie kind of feels, not necessarily to watch, but like how it feels from like a story structure. Because to me, the entirety of Skywalker felt very much like just well-produced fan fiction. Like somebody got a hold of like The Last Jedi and Force Awakens and is like, all right, but now I want these two characters to meet up, and then they kiss, and then these two characters do this because, hey, it feels like that thing that I liked in the other movie, and then it all very much feels like Abrams was just trying to course correct way too hard and just wrote fan fiction. And like, here's the part that I was thinking about as I was watching it, is, you know how D&D, the dudes who wrote Game of Thrones, are basically on record as saying they went on Reddit, would find people who accurately guessed their twists, went, oh shit, we need to change this now because it needs to be something different.
Ah, yes.
It feels like Abrams did the same thing, but instead of going, oh shit, we need to change this now, went, oh shit, that's a better idea than what I had, I'm just gonna do that.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of that. Yeah, I completely agree. Well-produced fan fiction is a good is a good way to describe it. And, for the record, while we're talking about fans, it must be said that I got a talking to, because I didn't give my mom enough props on the last episode for molding me into such a little nerd boy Star Wars fan. So we're giving mom a special shout out here. We'll give her opinion, the space, and she, as someone who has been watching the movies since the original came out in theaters, she loved it. She was thrilled. She was delighted. She wanted to go immediately back into the next showing as soon as we walked out, and I put the hard kibosh on that. So she had a lot of fun, and she is not a Last Jedi person. She's much more about Force Awakens than I am, which, it basically tracks. I think that if you are one of the people who didn't like Last Jedi and who did like Force Awakens for some reason, this'll do ya. This'll tickle ya. You won't have a bad time.
See, I don't know how true that is either, though, because like the showing that I was at, like, I have to imagine was mostly a ton of people who really like Star Wars, and like it ended with like 5 people applauding me, like, yeah, that was great. And that's not an isolated thing. Like, I'm looking on Twitter at people like Jenny Nicholson was saying the same thing, and like there's definitely a side of people who are like just done.
Yeah, I think a decent chunk of that is franchise fatigue. I mean, my theater was kind of like that. I can only give you my mom's perspective. That's my only reference pool here.
Oh,
so.
no, for sure. I'm just trying to say, like, there is another option as well.
You know what? Fair point. So I guess, I mean, fuck it. If you're a Star Wars fan, you're gonna see it. Who are we kidding? If you haven't already.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something that everyone will have seen.
Anyone who cares to see it will see it.
I will say though, just because there's so much I want to talk about in the pre-spoiler discussion, just about how I felt about it watching it, and like I just kind of keep bouncing around with my thoughts. I really probably should have organized these in a way that it would have made more sense as opposed to going, but back to what I was saying. Like 6 minutes ago, with the way that the whole movie is kind of structured as like skipping stones across planets and whatnot. It's really easy to kind of zone out too. I found myself kind of glazing over in scenes because like you just eventually you realize that each scene is so loosely tied to the other that it's way easier to just be like, I don't fucking care about this scene and it doesn't matter if what's going to happen next, so I'm just going to kind of stare at that spot on the screen for a couple minutes here. Yep, that's a scene. That's a thing that's happening. And also, this is more unrelated, but the guy next to me did fall asleep and snored through about half the movie.
Oh, that's amazing. I think regarding your point about how it's so easy to just sort of drift into kind of a hypnosis from like the moment to moment, I think part of that is that J.J. Abrams loves his MacGuffins. He loves his MacGuffins a whole lot. And so if we're comparing this to Return of the Jedi, because they have a similar structure in that there's kind of some unrelated space adventuring at the beginning and then a big sort of battle. That's kind of the general structure. It's very loose. Thing about Return of the Jedi was that they had a very specific goal at the beginning in sort of the Jabba's palace stuff. Like, yes, there was some character beats with like Luke, like, you know, becoming more of a full-fledged Jedi Knight. But really the goal was like, Han is in Carbonite, we gotta go rescue him. And that's the point of this sequence. We're rescuing beloved friend Han. Now here, a lot of this intro stuff in particular plays the same sort of tonally and like, all right, boys, we did our deconstruction last time. Let's get back to basics. Let's go on an adventure. And I got a couple problems with it. First is that the goal is just find Kylo Ren's Chaos Emeralds. And
where's that damn Sith holocron?
I know. Like it really feels like that, and like I think that's part of what makes Abrams' movies so forgettable in the broad strokes is that they're always chasing the mystery box. They're always chasing the MacGuffin. Like it's in Force Awakens too. They're looking for a map. They're looking for the map to Luke. It's not like rooted in character so much. Like even in
it's just
like,
it's a map again. What is with the fucking maps?
Abrams likes his maps. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I feel like there was some overly map-focused stuff in Star Trek too. Because it's easy. It's easy. It's like the most literal way to interpret a quest. You know, we need to go to somewhere. What do we have to do? Well, we have to find the map. And so it lacks sort of the emotional stakes of we need to free Han from Jabba's clutches, or even like in New Hope, like, you know, save the princess is an archetype as old as time, but that's like rooted in a character. Like while they're on the Death Star, Luke and Han are arguing like, "Oh, we came here to just lower the tractor beam," and Luke's like, "Well, Obi-Wan didn't know she was here. We got to go do something." Which means there's a little bit more stakes than just Kylo Ren's Chaos Emerald.
And I mean, like, the thing, too, with all those is that there's fucking characters. Like, it's very quickly apparent that all of the characters that you have grown to like over the past two movies, like, I liked a lot of the characters in Force Awakens, and I liked a lot of what they did with the characters in The Last Jedi. And then here, Finn doesn't really, it just kind of reverts back to like a less interesting version of himself in not Last Jedi, in fucking Force Awakens.
Well, here's the problem with Finn is that he's like a nothing of a character now.
Yeah.
And a big complaint about Last Jedi, and it's one that I share, is that like Finn has the exact same character arc as in Force Awakens, and that he's a kind of a cowardly lion guy who's like looking out for himself, who learns to be part of something bigger. And take that away from Finn though, like. That was preferable to this, because Finn just does nothing at all in this movie. He's completely pointless.
Yep, that's gone. Kylo Ren, the whole kind of like angst of him is basically gone. Like, he doesn't feel like he's got that same angst as he once did. He it very quickly undoes his own rise. Like, Kylo was one of my favorite characters in this trilogy just because he was so interesting as an idea, kind of like someone who is whiny and wants to be this just because that's what he wants, rather than like some aspirational goal of avenging his father or something and falling away. But just like, nah, fam, I like Darth Vader. I'm gonna be Darth Vader too. And also, this is a small one. I really miss Bitch Boy Hux.
Bitch Boy Hux, yeah, I'm shocked with how they dealt with him in this.
We'll talk about that in spoilers. That made me so fucking mad.
Yeah.
But he'd always been up to this point kind of like a sniveling coward to whoever was in charge. And in here, like, there's some of that still, but also he doesn't have the same feel. His whole character is gone. It just. That was honestly the biggest bummer to me, was what they did to Hux. And I know that's kind of weird because he's very much like a tertiary character, but I just really liked Hux.
Hux was a lot of fun as kind of a beta bitch boy bad guy. And yeah, we can talk about that in spoilers. I also wanted to mention like, there's very clearly an attempt, especially at the beginning, to sort of make like, because the thing about the original trilogy is that aside from Empire, where the party is like split and people are on the run, which is kind of how Last Jedi is too, there was very much this like, it almost felt like an RPG, in that like you have your quirky character roles, they all move as like a party. You have like, C-3PO, the comic relief, and Chewie's like the big guy, the hero, the rogue, the mentor, like all that stuff. And so there was kind of a focus on the group dynamics in the originals, which Force Awakens kind of did. It wasn't really that big a group because Poe was retrofitted to be an important character because he was originally meant to be killed off.
And also still has the most chemistry with Finn in this movie, despite the fact that they are very much trying to be like, no, they're not gay. Look, they both have female love interests.
Oh, man. Giving Poe his, like, angsty bounty hunter GF was cringe.
I honestly as a quick aside, thought that was going to be Zamwizel. It was not. Move on.
Anyway, but like, speaking of Poe, like, they try to do the thing. They try to basically just make Poe Han, and it does not work well at all. Like, him and Rey are just constantly fighting. Like, that was out of nowhere. Like, first thing is they're like arguing because Leia and Han used to argue, and it's like, whoa, like, this is not earned at all.
Right now, I am going to put the spoiler thing here because I want to talk about this as soon as we get into spoilers.
Yeah, okay.
So I'm going to put spoilers here. I'm going to say that next week is the Horsies. Come hang out for that. We're going to talk about the best, the worst, the most deaths, blah, blah, blah. All our good horsey fucking nonsense. I'm so excited for the Horsies. That's next week.
Horsies are my favorite part of the year just because we have a self-important award show,
and
I love self-important award shows.
So this is a minor point to the whole movie, but something that kind of actually does pay off in a big way at the end. But I really do want to talk about the romances in this movie, because and not just in the Poe and Finn should be together LOL way, despite the fact that is in fact the one true pairing of the movie, and everyone who disagrees is just a coward and refuses to admit what is clearly in front of their faces.
Chained by the past.
But I do just want to talk about this because when fucking Poe and Rey early on in the movie were kind of going at each other like that, it felt like you're right when you said Han and Leia, and I'm like, holy shit, that explains so much as to why immediately I thought that they were going to end up together. Like, I thought that was going to be the thing, because I'm like, Finn and Rey, I feel like, have never had a connection with each other. And we haven't seen a lot of Poe and Rey together, so I'm like, if they end up together, sure, we can introduce that as a thing in this movie, because Rey hasn't really had a clear love interest up to this point, unless you're a Reylo shipper, which I was vehemently not. So, like, when that happened, I'm like, okay, cool. Let's see how this goes. I think that they have a decent chemistry together in this bickering scene. Let's go from there. And then that kind of gets dropped and never really comes back. And then Poe finds his bounty hunter, spice runner, Space GF. And then Finn hangs out with the other stormtrooper woman, which I don't know that that's supposed to be a relationship thing, because it feels like Finn doesn't really have a relationship with anyone, but also, like, it feels like this movie desperately wants us to know that Poe and Finn are not gay in any way, shape, or form, so I wouldn't be surprised if that was an attempt at something. And then Rey and Kylo do get together, which, I mean, clearly from the fact that I just said I was vehemently not a Reylo shipper, I have thoughts about. But the bigger issue at hand for me is just, like, how much this movie wants people to get together, and, like, how horny it is for people to fucking bone, and yet how confused it is with who it wants to bone.
There's a big focus, I feel like, because you're right. I was feeling the same thing with, like, Rey and Poe. I'm like, oh no, are they doing this? There's a big, I feel like, especially with Rey, there's a big to-do about who's she gonna smooch.
Which is stupid, because she doesn't need to smooch anyone. And, like, I think that's kind of where I was at with this whole thing, is I'm like, I just kind of like her as a badass. And, like, she don't need no man, is what I'm saying here.
The problem is that all these characters are boring, and they don't have any interesting ideas, conflicts, or personalities.
They're boring, so put their peen in each other.
It's literally like the lowest common denominator, like, form of drama. Like, who's person X going to smooch? There is no, like, that Han and Leia relationship. Well, I'm just sitting here standing for George Lucas again. Like, that, there was chemistry there. Like, it's a classic archetype, like scoundrel and, like, hoity-toity princess, but it works. It's, Harrison Ford and Carrie Fisher had real charisma.
And you know what? Rey and Poe both have charisma. Like, that's why, like, in the beginning, like, even if it's kind of like, oh god, are they gonna do this? I was still for it. Oscar Isaacs is like a fucking, just, all of them are really charismatic, but Finn, I don't think, has charisma with anyone, like, intimately on screen.
No. I mean, that's just because Finn has nothing to do. Like, John Boyega was giving nothing
No, for
He's
sure.
a good actor.
But, like, that's what I'm saying. Like, even then, like, there was definitely some chemistry there that it could have been, like, yeah, dude, I'm fine with them doinking. It's a rehash of Han and Leia, but I don't know. At least they're, like, seem into each other, as opposed to, like, some weird Force thing. Reylo. Oh, I don't know where that came from. Sorry.
See, I don't know. So with Reylo, I definitely read the relationship between Kylo and Rey as at least having a hint of, like, a romantic element, just because of how, like, vulnerable that relationship is. Like, there's a big focus on that. And not that I was, like, a super diehard, like, Reylo shipper, because, to be honest, I don't give a shit about any of these characters.
You don't give a shit about any of these characters?
I don't give a shit. I don't give nothing. Like, honestly, real talk, the actors with the most, like, charisma of the entire movie and the entire trilogy are still that one scene with Han and Leia in The Force Awakens. So, yeah, no, you're totally right. There's a big focus on, like, resolving things romantically for some stupid fucking reason.
It never really felt like there was a whole romance thing to this movie outside of the intro of Force Awakens. Like, I feel like even after they fucking go to the rebel bases or whatever the fuck it is in The Force Awakens, they really undo all of the romantic tension between Poe and Finn want to fuck for all times. Finn and Rey, like that whole romantic subplot feels like it just kind of drops, and like it doesn't come back in The Last Jedi, unsurprisingly. But then it's kind of here depending on how you want to read scenes.
Yeah, so like, I guess let's talk about Finn first because it's it's shorter and he's boring.
We talked about Finn. Moving on.
But like, so there's the whole subplot of Finn being like Force sensitive. That's pretty explicitly textual with some of the things he does, some of his feelings, some of his Force tinglings that he gets. And Finn spends the whole movie being very dramatic about Rey, McQueen, there's something I have to tell you. That's my Jon Snow voice.
It was a voice that you did, and you did ascribe Jon Snow to it. I don't know that it's a Jon Snow voice.
So I, because of all the cringy dialogue in The Force Awakens about like, oh, you got a boyfriend, you got a cute boyfriend, I assumed they were doing the hackneyed, like, I didn't get to tell McQueen that I love her or whatever. But according to you, Sean, they have gone on the record as saying that Finn is trying to tell her that he's Force sensitive.
Yeah, I mean, granted, these are kind of some roundabout articles that like Abrams has confirmed it in. But like it for me, you can shout down confirmation bias. Go ahead, but I was just kind of flipping through things, and like I did see an article like this is what Finn was trying to tell Rey in the scene where they're getting swallowed by the sand. And I'm like, I didn't realize that this was an issue at all. But then I talked to Jackson and found out that we had differing opinions on it. And it definitely seems to indicate that fucking Abrams did say that it was him trying to reveal that he's Force sensitive. I say it seems like it because it was one of those fucking terrible articles that like you have to scroll through 3 pages of fucking backstory and like hopefully find the one thing that indicates it. And yeah, I mean, I could have missed something more important in it, but also I wasn't going to give it that much energy on it. But at the same time, it did definitely still indicate that like that's what it felt like they were going for, and I entirely agree. Especially because like if there's supposed to be a love triangle in this movie, and nowhere does the love triangle resolve into anything. Like there's never like a I am Kylo Ren and you Finn want that hot ass that I want too.
All right, so here's my thing about this. I've got 3 different arguments. 2 within the text, 1 that's basically just fuck J.J. Abrams for why I think this is just hack writing and filmmaking. And Finn's whole motivation in this movie was McQueen. 1, the Force sensitive plotline does not come up before this stupid sand thing happens, before the little quicksand moment. 2, they do, like you said, they do feed into, like, a love triangle plot line when they're about to get executed, and Poe says to Finn, like, what were you gonna tell Rey, boyo? And he's like, none of your business. And that felt very, like, passive-aggressive love triangle bullshit to me.
But, like, a love triangle between Rey, Finn, and Poe is also never addressed. Like, it feels like Poe is just, I don't know, man. There's never, like, an actual clear-cut relationship with any of these people.
I think that's just because the writing was bad and Poe's an asshole in this movie for no reason at all. But lastly, J.J. Abrams also said that he wasn't going to undo the revelation about Rey's parentage in The Last Jedi, and look how that turned out. So I don't trust him as far as I can throw him.
Well, I mean, strictly speaking, he didn't.
Oh, I know.
Right?
Like that was my favorite thing. Like, oh, the hoops. Well, technically, her parents were nobodies. Like she was Palpatine's granddaughter, and it's like, literally, her dad. Even if he ran away, her dad was the son of the Emperor. There is no way possible that you could construe that as a nobody. Kim Jong-un's brother is not a nobody, even though he is like not in North Korea anymore. That's ridiculous. It was such like obvious like PR weaseling on Abrams' part. Like, oh, we can't just say that we're gonna undo everything Rian Johnson did, but we're gonna undo everything Rian Johnson did.
Yeah. Oh god, that fucking part.
So Rey's a Palpatine, and this is where we just get into Return of the Jedi again, because her whole character arc is about whether or not she can overcome her toxic legacy, which is a fine character arc. It was a fine character arc in Return of the Jedi. And then I also wanted to, just at the moment before I launch into my big spiel about Palpatine, because I think it's not that the movie at its core had only bad ideas that couldn't have possibly worked, but there's just so much shit in this movie that they put it all in at once. They had no plan. They switched between two directors with wildly different ideas of what Star Wars is supposed to be and made a giant doo-doo in the theaters. So, Kylo then, they have another throne room scene. Rey throws a fucking spirit bomb at Palpatine.
Oh my god.
And then Kylo redeems himself in like the exact same way that Darth Vader did, which I think explains why Kylo has none of his edge that he had, none of his genuine, like, angry, unhinged, like, nature.
Character might be the word that you're looking for.
Yeah. They were so eager to redeem him. They were so eager to just do Darth Vader again.
Wild.
It's so crazy. Because, like, to me, when Kylo Ren becomes Supreme Leader, like, that to me is like and I'm sure this was Rian Johnson's intention, is, you know, shutting the door. We're not going to do the Vader thing. He is not like Vader. Like, we got to take him down. But now we just do the Vader thing, and to bring it back around to the romance angle, you know, Rey, she used up too much of her energy throwing the spirit bomb, which they got Hayden Christensen and Liam Neeson and Sam Jackson,
and like I think the person who voices Ayla Secula in the Clone Wars series is in there. There's some fucking names in there. I think Ewan McGregor was in there too, wasn't he?
Oh, definitely. Yeah,
yeah.
They might have even cut a bit of Alec Guinness's voice. I thought I heard that because I know they did that for Force Awakens. Anyway, so that's part of the plot about Jedis and Sith being like Avatar the Last Airbender and absorbing the essence of all the previous generations, which has never been a thing now. It only exists to make the story seem more finale. We'll talk about that later. So Kylo transfers his energy, literally Dragon Ball style, to Rey's corpse to bring her back to life, and then he smooches her, and then he fades into the ether. So
he becomes a Force ghost, like fucking Vader.
So, problems I have with this. Not necessarily that Reylo is confirmed. I think there's enough in the text, whether or not it's like a thing that I personally ship. I think there's enough in the text to support it.
I mean, as a quick aside, I do think you're right. I think there is theoretically enough in the text to support it. I just think it's such like a fucking boring thing to do with it that I just wasn't about it.
Yeah. And so what I do find boring is that Kylo brings Rey back to life. And I'm not saying that I want them to go, like, hand in hand, run off into the sunset. Because I was talking about it with Mom. Like, I remember I saw that, we saw this with one of my mom's friends, and when Kylo disappeared into a Force Ghost, my mom's friend literally, like, threw up her hand, like, what the fuck is this?
Yes, retweet.
Because you can still do interesting things with Kylo's character that aren't necessarily, like, run off into the sunset. Like, oh, we smooched, we resolved our tension, Kylo Ren, you're a war criminal. We can't be together. Like, and he goes and runs off and, like, tries to atone and becomes, like, a Ronin, kind of like Lucas's original plan for Luke back before the prequels. Like, they could have done stuff, but they just had to take the easy way out. And I think also, again, another contrivance to make it feel like a grand finale, to make Rey the last of the Skywalkers, because that's the last. Yep. That's the last of the big hooks, is that, you know, she takes on the surname.
Did you hear that they're calling this the Skywalker Saga now?
Yeah, well, let's put a pin in that one, because I've got some feelings.
Oh, boy, I tell you what, I do too.
So, you know, she takes on the name Skywalker as part of, like, a surrogate mommy and daddy, Leia and Luke, like, look on in the distance as Force ghosts. Well, she goes back to Tatooine for, like, MGS4 closure. Fine. but it just reeks so much of like the decision to kill Kylo is like, like there might be some complications, some interesting things if we kept him alive. Just Force ghost him, raise finger quotes the last Skywalker. And also mixed metaphor because she makes her own lightsaber that no one else has ever had before. and throws away like her old like Skywalker legacy while simultaneously taking it up. So, I got a doo-doo in my butt and I don't know what to do. That's what Abrams said when he made this movie.
Oh, all right. I was not aware he was so sing-song.
No, but seriously, yeah, that's basically all I've got on the romance stuff. They made Kylo Vader again, which is, just more retreads. We don't need more fucking retreads of the original trilogy. The original trilogy is great. I agree. Don't make it again, but worse. And, yeah, and then they had him smooch. Again, just seemingly for the Reylo shippers, but then Kylo's dead anyway, so who cares?
Yeah, no, it's fucking stupid. I do, just because you mentioned your mom's friend throwing her arms up, and like this is the perfect like intersection of the things that we've been talking about. To talk about the 3 moments in the movie that I threw my hands up in the air in exasperated what the fuck just happenedness. And this is not actual like constructive criticism. This is more just me being like, hey, Abrams, what the fuck? Which, number one, the kiss, because I still maintain that I don't think they had a whole lot of romantic chemistry. I think they worked better as like yin and yang who don't want to do the pee-pee dance. So that was very much like a, hang on, what the fuck? Where is this coming from? Why? Rey being a Palpatine, which is, Jackson's about to start talking about Palpatine here in a second, so that feels like a good segue there. It was incredibly obvious and also incredibly boring and also makes no fucking goddamn sense. So what the fuck? That's the dumbest fucking twist I could basically think of, honestly. It somehow felt stupider than Rey being a Skywalker, which, hey, she kind of ends up being anyway. But yeah, that was not about that. And then the last one, shout out to my boy Hux. Why the fuck was he the traitor?
That was so weird, especially because, like, one of my favorite lines in The Last Jedi is when Snoke is talking to Kylo about Hux, and he's like, Kylo, you may be wondering why I keep an absolute rabid dog madman like him around. And he's the fucking worst, and I'm Supreme Leader Snoke. But he's useful to have around because he's so angry and fascistic. And so, no, I was thinking that too. Like, Hux is the guy that was literally making Hitler speeches right before he fired Starkiller Base. Like, the man was a full fascist.
But
so
listen, Kylo needs to lose. Okay, what?
Like, I like that they have their petty bitch boy squabbles. I don't like that they had to undo everything that was fun about Hux just to introduce, like, not Grand Moff Tarkin at the very end.
Oh, God.
Who we've never seen before.
Yeah, I thought so. I should have asked you about that. I didn't think about that. Yeah, I had no idea who that guy was. But no, fucking Hux, the fact that they made him the traitor was the stupidest goddamn thing in the fucking world, and they cleaned that up nicely immediately afterwards in the least interesting conclusion ever. Hux was such an interesting character. The fucking Hux Kylo dynamic was great, and then it's just like, nah, Hux is so mad at Kylo that he wants to sabotage the whole thing, and that doesn't make a goddamn lick of sense. Not even a little bit. Like, that's fucking nothing. Because,
like, Hux was, like, a dyed-in-the-wool fascist. Like, he believes in the Empire. Like, not like Kylo. Kylo's just in it for, so he could have a cool sword and have his dumb knights.
It would make sense if Kylo did that.
Yeah.
Hux, absolutely not. Hux is a loyalist till he dies. But apparently not, because Kylo was mean to me.
All right. I have, I gotta say, while we're talking about things, before we go into the final order, the final speech about Palpatine.
Fuck the final order. Christ.
The most fan fiction thing about the movie is that Palpatine calls his merged fleet the final order. So, I've said previously that the shark jumping moment for the Star Wars franchise was in The Force Awakens when they build a bigger Death Star and blow up 5 planets at once. I think I know I use these words in the pre-discussion. I don't know about the episode, but I've been on record as calling it the most low IQ moment in the entire franchise. That includes everything in the prequels. Well, I stand corrected because we have a new one as of Rise of Skywalker. Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce you to the Death Star Destroyer, a Star Destroyer with a Frieza cannon that destroys planets, and there are thousands of them.
Oh god, Abrams only knows how to increase stakes by just making there be more stakes. That's nothing.
He is literally on like Dragon Ball Super tier writing. Like, how do we make a bad guy scarier than Frieza and Boo? Because they destroyed planets. Make him destroy the universe. That's the only thing he knows how to do. He did it in Star Trek, and he did it in Star Wars, and I'm so fucking mad. Here's my hard, fast rule for Star Wars going forward. Disney, you are not allowed to put anything resembling a Death Star in these fucking movies. Anything.
If you blow up a planet, you fucked up.
We're scaling it back. No more.
It's kind of crazy that fucking Rian Johnson managed to make things feel more tense than having a fleet of fucking portable Death Stars in just the small fucking cruise chase, right? Like, wow, what a concept.
I'm not going to give him that much credit because he specifically pointed out that stupid cannon they used to try and bust out the door was Death Star tech, which is not nearly as grievous of an offense, but like between this and Rogue One, I'm like, enough of the fucking Death Star.
That's fair. I'm referring specifically to the space stuff, though.
But no, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. All right.
I mean, even being Death Star tech in and of itself is not saying it's Death Star tech makes sense, given that it just needs to be a destructive power. I don't think that that's egregious, like, really much at all, other than just kind of, it's definitely lip service and fan service in that way, but, like, it doesn't need to be. You're entirely right. But also, like, oh no, it's Death Star tech that can blow up a door.
It's just like you with the Reylo thing. It's supported by the text. It definitely makes sense that they would go that way. But the very words Death Star send me into a fucking conniption at this point.
All right, talk about your Palpatine thing. I don't want to spend. I'm on fucking holidays right now. I don't want to spend 2 hours talking about this goddamn movie, despite the fact that I know that we could.
All right. So here is, I think, the core fundamental narrative problem with the movie. And you guessed it, it is Palpatine. Not necessarily for the reasons that you might be thinking, though. So let's talk about Palpatine in general real quick. Let's all get on the same page here, because people like Palpatine. And I think that's fair to say. I consider him a good villain, and let's talk about why. And let's dive into what George Lucas, Big Man George, Big Daddy George, has been on record as saying that some of his influences for Emperor Palpatine included Richard Nixon, Napoleon Bonaparte, and the devil. So...
Listen, you told me that list in the pre-discussion, but the final delivery of the devil still fucking makes me laugh.
Let's unpack that a little bit, because those things seem a little bit incompatible, right? Like, you have two real people who, Napoleon was a conqueror and Richard Nixon was like a kind of a sleazy politician. So let's unpack that. So we can see the politician influence a lot more clearly in the prequels, where Palpatine, he's
literally a politician.
Literally a politician.
Palpatine politician's kind of a weirdly hard thing to say.
It kind of is. And so and the thing about him is that he's powerful. Like, he can match Yoda in a fight, which, according to like Dragon Ball logic means that he's strong. But like, other than that, it's not like he's so godlike as to be invincible. Like, it's not like he crushes Yoda like with his pinky finger. And most of what he needs to do is through deception and political maneuvering. And so, more than just Ian McDiarmid's performance, which is always great, and more than just like the prequel memes, which of course are fun. I'm in on that shit too. Side note, they explain away Palpatine's resurrection, not at all. Kylo literally asks him how he survived, and his response is basically, don't worry about it, fam, except through a prequel meme.
There's some sort of explanation that, like, he never died in the first place.
What he says is, the dark side is a path to abilities that some people consider unnatural, which is a big fucking Palpatine meme.
There's definitely, there's some, like, extended canon that says that he never died. And, like, it's referenced somewhere. I don't know where. I, honest to God, did not, like, want to fucking dive into the goddamn lore of how Palpatine's still around. I do, just while we're here on the earlier stages of Palpatine, need to talk about the Snoke clones. I don't really have anything other to say than there are Snoke clones, which is stupid. And that's my Snoke clone discussion. Thank you for coming.
I'm gonna put a pin in the Snoke clones. We'll come back to that. So, we have Politician Palpatine in the prequels, but then we have Palpatine's first appearance as the big bad in Return of the Jedi. And I think that this is where we see, if you think about it the right way, like, invoking the devil, like the Christian devil, makes a lot of sense in a way that still doesn't make him... Because Palpatine in Return of the Jedi, we don't see him at all in New Hope. The Emperor's flunkies, Tarkin, the governors, they're all controlling everything. In Empire Strikes Back, Vader talks to him for a bit. But for the most part, he's just kind of this ethereal sort of force. And when we finally meet him, Palpatine's main move, again, is manipulation. It's not just the performance that makes Palpatine a good villain, it's the fact that he's always kind of scheming and that nothing is as straightforward as it seems with him. And particularly the main tool that he uses, both on Luke and Anakin, is temptation. More so with Luke, in that, like, he kind of sets up this situation where he wins either way. Either Luke gives into his hatred and kills Vader and accepts the powers of the dark side, or Vader kills Luke and, the big threat's out of the way. Obviously, that doesn't work out for him because he didn't account for Vader turning, and that's, what makes it a great little emotional story beat. Great movie, Return of the Jedi. People underrate it. But
Ewoks.
But Ewoks, am I right, gamers? So that's what makes Palpatine a good villain. It's not just that he's a ham, although that helps. It's that at the core, his character, he operates very much in the realm of the human. He doesn't need, like, a tragic backstory. He's not like Vader in that way. But he's still nonetheless just kind of a guy, a powerful guy, both politically and in the Force, but just a dude nonetheless. So Palpatine in this movie also draws influence from Satan, but less like the Christian Satan and more like the pop culture Satan, like the all-powerful anti-god. Palpatine can, like, shoot lightning into the air and down an entire fleet. He has absorbed all of the Sith essence and wants to bestow it upon his granddaughter Rey in, like, an Avatar: The Last Airbender thing. He has been controlling everything all along. He's the author of all our pain, because Snoke either was just working under his orders, or, maybe because he's so strong, is just like a literal puppet, which just goes to show that they could have made this work. They could have made bringing Palpatine back work. That's not necessarily the worst idea in the world. The problem is that they establish Snoke, who's a nothing of a character. They kill off Snoke because Rian Johnson smartly realized that he was nothing of a character. And then they said, oh shit, we don't want Kylo to be the main villain. What do we do now? It was Palpatine all along. And so, just
Snoke
like in...
was a red herring.
Snoke was just a red herring. So, Palpatine, there's no, like, good scheme. There's no, like, nice manipulations that we get to see play out. He just sort of was power leveling his Death Stars on a Sith planet he dispatched Snoke to do everything. And he's just like an unstoppable, like overpowered, whatever the opposite of a Mary Sue is, like God. Until Rey throws a spirit bomb at him.
And Barry Dew.
Barry Dew. He's Barry Dew. He's Barry Dew for a death. He's been sticking around for too long. So, and this is, I think, the main problem with this is a finale. Because think about Return of the Jedi, and the thing about Revenge of the Sith, too, and I think that this ties back into the whole Skywalker Saga thing, is that Return of the Jedi, I think, works really well as a cap to a trilogy. It builds on all the characters. Han and Leia's situation is resolved. Luke becomes a full-fledged Jedi Knight. Darth Vader is redeemed.
And Luke doesn't doink his sister. And all's well that ends well. It's a happy ending executed very well. Which is why it's infuriating that we come back to basically the exact same space at the end of this movie, having squandered all the potential of a blank slate that a happy ending gives you. So that's a pretty good finale. Like they're now, if you like look into it, Return of the Jedi wasn't always meant to be sort of the grand finale of the Lucas version. He had different plans at different ideas in time, but he got sick of Star Wars and kind of retrofitted Return of the Jedi to be the grand finale. And I'd say it worked pretty well, aside from maybe, like, if you watch the original trilogy sort of outside the context of the Star Wars thing, maybe the twist about Leia being his sister is not the most elegant thing. Because the fun fact that Leia was originally not meant to be a sister. The sister, the New Hope, mentioned in Empire, was meant to be a brand new character in the prequel outline that Lucas had. It was Vader redeems himself just like in Return of the Jedi and dies. The Emperor survives the encounter. Luke goes off to become a Ronin, basically, to find his sister, who is not Leia, who is a brand new character, who's like a main character of a theoretical Lucas-helmed episode 7, 8, 9. But he got tired of Star Wars and he wanted to make the prequels, so he just cut it off at Return of the Jedi and tied up the loose ends. So I think that works out pretty well. Revenge of the Sith. We didn't know that it was going to be the, not the grand finale, but it had that feeling. The prequels were kind of meeting in the middle there. There's sort of this inevitability to everything as we have to get to where New Hope is going, and then that final echo of Owen and Beru holding Luke while Obi-Wan watches, looking into the twin suns. There's some pathos to that because, the cycle has come full circle, and now we have a complete 6-act story on our hands, regardless of how questionable the quality of individual chapters may have been. Problem with Rise of Skywalker is that it bills itself as the end of the Skywalker Saga. So one, Last Jedi had already made it clear that this was not necessarily the Skywalker Saga. So the fact that my favorite fucking tweet to come out of this was somebody being like, Rian Johnson, anyone can be a hero. J.J. Abrams slamming table. No, absolutely the fuck not.
Yeah. So I don't mind. This is another thing I think about the discourse that I think is kind of weird, in that, especially with the original trilogy, Star Wars has kind of gained a reputation as being super about destiny and bloodlines and that sort of gatekeeping of heroism. I don't think that's really true, especially for the original trilogy. I think that's more of an EU thing, because in the original trilogy, it's more just about Luke being a nothing farm boy who kind of goes through his own cycle. Vader being his father isn't about having a heroic Joestar lineage. It's about as George Lucas himself puts it, it's like a melodrama, like a family soap opera in space, and sort of wrangling with these questions of how we deal, these very personal questions of how we deal with our parents' actions and how they influence us as people. And then they did introduce the Destiny stuff in the prequels, but for the purposes of basically saying that that kind of thinking is dangerous because Anakin turned out to be a violent fascist because he was a special chosen boy. So I don't really think that was always one of the things about Last Jedi that was weird to me, is that it had a very it was like a seemingly defiant statement about like anyone could be a hero, and it's like, well, I don't know if the original movies really disagree with you. I think the point of the prequels is that chosen one destinies are bad. But that's kind of a tangent.
Kind of
a tangent.
Kind of.
But it's something that we haven't mentioned, but it's been on my mind during the whole discourse.
See, my favorite part is, remember how I just said that I'd like this to wrap this up, kind of end this, and I go off to make a little joke, and you're like, well, listen, let me talk about how this little joke is wrong.
You know what, Sean? That's what I'm here for. All right, I'll do my best to wrap it up. So point being with all that is that it's billing itself as the end of the Skywalker Saga, not the end of the Star Wars series, because of course we can't end Star Wars. There'd be too much fucking money in that. Like we're not gonna lose all that money. This is just the end of the Skywalker Saga. Don't you worry. So already that kind of gives away the game on like what this movie's going to be about. Like now harder than ever, and I do agree with this, harder than ever we're going into like bloodlines and destinies and all that dumb bullshit that the other movies weren't really about. And furthermore, because there has been no setup, it's like, well, what do we do? Like, we want this to be a grand finale to the previous, 9 movies, but we haven't set anything up that leads to a logical conclusion. So the only thing that we can do is bring back our scariest bad guy and just say that he was in charge of everything to make everything feel climactic. So yeah, I'll admit, I'm a sucker for a spirit bomb ending. Like, I had a nice, they dragged Hayden Christensen out of the toll booth. Like, hooray! That was some nice fan service, but just like MGS4, that's all it is.
Yeah, no, I definitely see what you're saying. Like, is it them saying the Skywalker Saga implying the whole 9-movie series, or is it just the ending of this new trilogy? I was under the impression...
The whole 9 movies.
Okay, that makes more sense. I was under the weird impression that it was just this trilogy. But
no,
that also makes it somehow more galling.
Well, especially because, it would make more sense if the Skywalker Saga was, the George Lucas movies, that's the story of Anakin and his son, and now we're moving on to these new characters who are influenced by the past, but not necessarily directly tied in the same way, except for Kylo.
But he's gone, so it's okay.
But yeah, so that's it now. Rey takes up the name Skywalker to continue the proud Joestar lineage because that's super important now.
Well, hey, this is the thing that you wanted to talk about. I know that you mentioned this in the pre-discussion, a little bit of a tease earlier on. You wanted to talk about where you think these are going, and I know you've kind of even touched on that already now. So I'll let you continue to talk. Where are you hoping that these movies go?
Yeah, where am I hoping that these movies go? Okay, so I have the blessing. Like I said, I'm sad that they copied Return of the Jedi without understanding what makes that movie good. But it's a blessing that they kind of return us to the same, Emperor is defeated, the final order has been finaled, soundly thrashed. So where do we go from here? We have a clean slate. Here's what I want. Now, they already fucked up the idea of navigating the political complexities of a happy ending because they just said, let's do the original trilogy again. So I don't want anything related to this. I want the movie to be either so far back in the past, thousands of years, Knights of the Old Republic era, which is what they were going to do a trilogy with that, with D&D of Game of Thrones same. Thankfully, that's not happening anymore. So either thousands of years of the past or thousands of years of the future. I don't care. Far enough to be removed from the Lucas movies. Far enough to be removed from this mess. No more shitty little side stories.
But the rebirth of Palpatine.
The devil is back. And
every 4,000 years, I rise again for my quest of power.
Oh my god! I'll tell you what I don't want to say. I don't want to see Palpatine become fucking Ganondorf.
Oh my god,
that'd be the worst. So now I understand that gut reaction, I think, to a lot of people is well, hold on. They set up Rey going off on her own. We need to follow Rey. And so I think that it's fair. I know people like Rey. I mean, I don't especially care for any of the new characters. I think that she's become enough of a beloved character for people to be attached. So here's what you do. You don't continue this story because it's a clusterfuck. What you do is you have, like, Rey start the new Jedi Order and basically make Rey, the Zelda comparison is actually a good one, make them talk about Rey in whatever future movie the same way they talk about Link from Ocarina of Time and all the games after that. Like, this is a super important, like, legendary person. And I think that would still be respectful to this new character that they built that people really like without having to tie themselves into the absolute story mess that was the sequel trilogy, and gives them room to do their own thing. Kind of make her the new Luke in that sense. So I think, like, yeah, a couple 100 years, 1,000 years even into the future, new status quo, new Jedi Order, you know, maybe more factions, just like the Sith. The Sith are done. Something. But they had a blank slate with Return of the Jedi. And they fucked it up tremendously by mismanaging the project. And now they have a blank slate again, which means there's at least a chance. I'm not a total cynic. Like, Disney's a corporate nightmare that's anti-art, but they do make good things sometimes. So, what I want to see as far as the production side of things, I want, like, I want them to either give the whole trilogy, like, from the get-go, just give one person a blank check to sort of shape the thing as, like, an individual story. That could be Rian Johnson. I wouldn't necessarily prefer that. As we've discovered, I'm not the hugest fan of his writing style. But in that vein, like, give it to one person instead of dancing between all these shitty little directors with such a loose, like, producer hand. If you are going to give it to several directors to, like, change up styles, because that is technically what Lucas did for New Hope, Empire, and Return of the Jedi, the difference is that Lucas was always a strong creative presence as a producer. So even if you have, like, the Star Wars equivalent of, like, a Kevin Feige, is that how you say his name? Like, the Marvel guy? You know, that can work too. Like, different directors, but still someone kind of shepherding it. Because obviously, whatever Kathleen Kennedy is doing right now, she's not doing that. And so basically, you know, we now have a chance. Maybe, you know, Star Wars hopefully will, in the theaters, it'll go away for a couple years. They can do some of their side stuff like the Obi-Wan series and some other little stuff on Disney+. I think that's a better format for it. And just let the new movies be a trilogy of standalone, fun space adventures. It could be, you know, Old Republic, could be, you know, 1,000 years in the future, so we can still, you know, like, enshrine Rey's legacy for, you know, all the new fans that have enjoyed her character and, like, related to her. Like, that's fine by me. Just get it away from this absolute narrative mess.
Fair shake. I mean, listen, mine's gonna be way more succinct and, like, to the point, and yeah. I would like Star Wars to be about smaller stories, smaller, more personal stories within the universe. But honestly, at that point, I just want different movies. I don't care if it's Star Wars, just make a different movie. But since I know that's not going to happen, just make them smaller, more personal stories. Don't make trilogies anymore, okay? Fuck that. Fuck all that shit. Just make small movies. If you want to make Star Wars movies, just put them in the fucking universe. Like, that's all there is to it. You can just make a different movie and be like, it's a Star Wars movie. Don't tie them into other things. Just, like, use the shorthand that we know about it to make a new thing. You know, you've got years of lore set up. You can just be like, Jedi, and we'll be like, okay, we know what that is. Perfect. I don't need to explain what a Jedi is in this movie. Moving on.
So, you know what? I agree to an extent, but I think there's something to be said for the trilogy, I think, when executed correctly. And I think that the key is this, that what separates the good trilogies from bad trilogies is that a good trilogy will have because the benefit of a trilogy is that you can tell something a little bit grander, and Star Wars was always designed to be kind of grand. So I think it's appropriate. I think your route would also work pretty well considering what the franchise has become. Yeah, I mean, there's just a reason that all the, series and stuff that I meme about, they tend to be these long, like, generational sagas about, like, multiple characters over the course of several years. I mean, I just think there's a real value to that. So I don't disagree in that you don't have to do the whole trilogy thing. But I mean, I don't know. I still think there's some value to it.
I mean, there is. It's literally it's just a difference of an opinion, honestly, and that's really what it boils down to. Is I'm just exhausted by big, long spanning things, given the Marvel universe itself as well. Like, everything has to be connected to everything else, and there can't just be small individual stories anymore. And like, if we're making a story, it has to be a trilogy, because we have to expound on everything and make sure that we don't need that all the time. There's concision in words. You don't have to bloviate your whole fucking story into 3 movies when you can make it in 1. And sure, there are reasons to do trilogies and series and whatnot, but like, everything right now has to be a series. We can't. There's not just like, I made this movie, look at this movie. Did you enjoy it?
Yeah.
Stellar. Move on.
Yeah.
God, I'm so done with Star Wars. Do you have anything you want to say before we wrap up here? Are we good?
I think we're good. Fortunately for us, we do not have to worry about Star Wars again for hopefully quite some time, because they have no clue what to do now.
Yep, they shot themselves in the foot quite hard, so this is getting shelved. I've been Sean McKinda. You can find me on Twitter at Sean_McKinda. Find me on Twitch, twitch.tv/Shuffles_Skippy, and find my work over at 25yearslatersite.com.
And I'm Jackson Keller. You can find me at twitch.tv/JacksonJKeller. I mean, probably not until like the new year, to be honest.
You can follow the podcast on Twitter at BADH_cast. It's when we post updates, let you know when new things have come out. Like our final Beating a Dead Horse bonus episode came out on Monday. It's about The Fanatic, the arguably one of the worst movies of the year. Go listen to it. It's a great episode. Although, you know what? If you want to listen to it, you do need to be a member of our Patreon. And you can do that by going over to patreon.com/BADHcast. At $1 a month, you get access to our Discord, where you can hang out and chat with us and yell at us and all the things that you need to do. At $5 a month, you get access to all of our bonus episodes, including that Fanatic episode. $10 a month gets you access to all our bonus episodes, as well as lets you be like, hey, I want you to talk about this movie, and we'll talk about that movie. So, get your requests in. $10 a month also gets you a little something.
Skitsy this. Thank you so much. Travis, Julia, Mom, Aunt Summer, y'all are great. Keeping the lights on, the Christmas lights on. Happy New Year.
Yep. Also,
what a prize for $10.
Also, thanks to the Lords of the Highway for the use of our theme song. It is Suicide Alternate Take off the album High Octane Low Expectations. They're a wonderful band. They got a bunch of great music. You should go check them out wherever you can. Streaming services, buy their albums, go see them live, whatever you got to do. Also, thanks to 25yearslatersite.com for like the endorsement. You can go click on our little logo on their website and check out all that we have to offer you. But they also have a bunch of really, really talented writers doing a bunch of really, really talented writing. They got reviews, analyses, interviews, critiques. If you name it, they probably have it. Wrestling, movies, TV shows, video games, all that good stuff. They're wonderful people doing a bunch of really talented writing. Next week, as I said, is our annual Horsies. So come back, hang out, listen to what we've talked about, listen to what we have to say with regards to fucking movies that came out this year. I'm losing my mind, clearly. I'm getting tired the longer I talk here. So I'm gonna go have some holiday fun. Ho ho ho.
Tidings of good cheer.
Bye.
Don't you go into the ground. Don't you go